Well, hello, folks. Today we're going to talk about what I'm working on and what's so important in the province. I've literally had over 156 comments, about another 180 personal PMs asking me about what I'm working on. How does this benefit all Canadians? Why am I doing this? What does this matter against the federal corruption of the government, and on and on and on. And I want to start, before I even get into it, folks, I want to start with the very first thing that I have to address. And this is in relation to Premier Danielle Smith and a lot of comments, not a huge amount. It's hardly just a fraction of my friends and followers, as clearly seen on likes, loves, angry faces. I think I've had about maybe 10% who've been disheartened, and then I see a pile of other people, friends and followers, almost laughing, making it laughable against these conservatives, which many of them I know personally. I've known them for a long time, even Alberta separatists, which does distinguish the 51st staters from Alberta separatists. And I want to be clear about this. I ran a platform, The Legal Path to Alberta Independence, and I've never ever strayed from that design. And further working on this is a whole new way legally to fix Canada. And if not, any region, meaning any province or territory, could legally leave Canada at that point. And in fact, for all those who say they're separatists or successionists, you need provincial constitutionalism. If you don't have that, if you don't address the overlying crown, and absolutely, this is for every region in Canada, meaning all provinces and territories, if you do not address and constitute in real constitution right here in Canada for the provinces, First Peoples, that is your Treaty Indians, your unceded Indians, your Métis, and your Inuit, it's game over for any narrative that you would present to go forward. In absence of the First Peoples, you're doomed. And what do I mean by that? Well, folks, there is no federalism. Canada's, it's limited federalism in our constitutional acts of Canada, meaning our highest laws of the land that give any federalism, any federal division of powers to any First Peoples. Zero, none whatsoever. In fact, since 1858, the province of Canada, it's been the savage Indian. I didn't create this. I didn't legalize it. I didn't legislate it. I'm not a legislator. I'm going to write some legislation that legislators can take forward. But folks, savages and subjects, that is the legal description of all Canadian citizens who are not crown politicians, crown first class sworn inside the government. If you're not one of those people, you are a subject. You're subject to that crown, the master. Again, I didn't create these terms. I didn't create this legal speak. It's called the Crown Customary Law, meaning unwritten laws that are the highest laws of Canada in the land. And they're inside your highest law, the Constitutional Acts of Canada, 1867, 1982. And that's where we're going to start. The highest laws of the country and the Crown power. The Crown power is all that this Constitutional Conventions Act in the province of Alberta is about. Before I go on, we're going to address Marilyn Burns, a very good friend of mine. I've known her for years. And it's clear in a lot of comments, at least a dozen or more, she chimed in my defense, why I talk about Danielle Smith's Sovereignty Act, and I'm angry. And you better believe it, folks. I'm angry that Danielle Smith would bring forward an unconstitutional piece of legislation she knows full well will be shot down. Now, this isn't an ignoramus woman or a fanciful woman. This is a woman that ran the Wild Rose Party of Alberta. She had 2 lieutenants, a right hand, a left hand. And folks, clearly many of you don't know anything about Danielle Smith's political history. A lot of you, because you had never talked to Marilyn Burns like that. She was the right hand of Danielle Smith under the Wild Rose Party. Anyone who's been around, who's been involved with that party, was a founding member or a member of that original party, even all the way through Brian Jean, a real Wild Roser, you should know exactly who Marilyn Burns is and what she meant to that party. If you don't know much about her, she has the Alberta Advantage Party. And I made the mistake, and I'm sorry, Marilyn, I forgot to add your name specifically when I made my post about who would get the Alberta Constitutional Conventions Act, November 11th, 2022. You're absolutely on that list, Marilyn. In fact, you're number 1 on that list. You will get that for sure. And folks, Danielle Smith floor-crossed against the wishes of her right and left hands, her 2 lieutenants. Marilyn Burns is one of those lieutenants. In fact, she pretty much built and designed the Wild Rose Party of Alberta in its entirety. She did that. She did that. Very intelligent, highly intelligent woman. You may not like her religious convictions. I don't mind that at all. She is a powerful mind. She's done much in this province and proved that she is able to do impossible things, as she too had a signature drive done. She too developed a party, and she did that with very little. She did that on her own. She's a master of political science. She's a lawyer right here in the province of Alberta and has a tremendous history with the Conservative parties in Alberta, from PC all the way through to the build of Wild Rose and now the build of the Alberta Advantage Party. To dismiss her or not hear her credence as a bar-holding lawyer and a master of political science. In fact, the crafter and writer and developer of the Wild Rose Party in Alberta underneath Danielle Smith. Danielle Smith didn't do that work. Marilyn did. Marilyn did. Anyone will tell you this. Any real conservative, any Wild Roser will tell you this. So folks diminishing her or saying she has some kind of reason to lie about the Sovereignty Act, I'm afraid not, folks. The Sovereignty Act is unconstitutional. Which now, second part, brings me to this. The Alberta Constitutional Conventions Act that I'm delivering to going to be Premier Danielle Smith in 30 days, and to the official opposition and all registered party leaders of every party in Alberta. The Alberta Constitutional Conventions Act is Crown-powered. What do I mean by that? Unlike the unconstitutional Sovereignty Act, I'm going to bring forward an act for Alberta legislators, to put through, that is backed up and endorsed 100% by the Crown in Canada, meaning the federal government has to go with it. It means the provincial Crown has to go with it. And why is that? Folks, since 1867, all the way through all our 11 amendments, Supreme Court of Canada decisions, and absolutely that amendment and package 1982, consolidating all of it, 4 acts, 11 amendments, plus Supreme Court decisions. Part 5, Section 58, by way of the Premier and clearly Lieutenant Governor, mandates provincial constitutions. That is the Crown in Canada, meaning the federal government has already given you that. This was the design from the royal family and from the United Kingdom that has never been dismembered or repealed inside all consolidated acts making up the Canadian Constitution. It's there, everyone can read it. No lawyer, no justice, absolutely no chief of justice will shut a provincial constitution down. Not a constitutional convention to lead there. Nobody. Further, from section 58, as you continue forward, you get to section 92. Onward all the way to section 104, going through all of the powers that belong in a provincial constitution. We are going to write I'm going to write a provincial constitutional conventions act in the province of Alberta to codify all those, and a procedure of how you, the people, will do that, and a template for the provincial government in power to go through that. It's going to go through all of it. And again, I'm going to tell you folks, it's Crown called for, Crown powered, meaning no Prime Minister can breach the Constitution and stop it. Do you understand that? Prime Minister Justin Trudeau will be armbarred. He won't be able to do anything about it. His Majesty's official opposition, Pierre Poilievre, will not be able to do anything about it. They're all sworn to the Crown. Every MP, every MLA are sworn to the Crown, oath sworn. This is the highest law of the Crown, cemented since the founding of Canada as a province, through the BNA, through absolutely 1867, and has never been dismembered or repealed, not by the Supreme Court of Canada or any majority government or any Privy Council. It remains there forever and a day for any premier to pick up and follow through with. It is constitutional. Not only constitutional, meaning completely legal, it's mandated since Canada was inceptionalized, since we became a country in 1867. Forever and a day, and nobody has repealed it. Have I covered that now? Do you see the difference between unconstitutional, meaning we're going to take sovereignty, which is unconstitutional in Canada, and then constitutional conventions for a province to codify a real constitution for and by the people? Now, I want to continue on here. There's a history, just in recent history, for all Albertans. We can go through every province, but I'm doing this catalyst, and a lot of people have said, well, what about our province? What about our territory? How's this going to affect us? Well, this is the catalyst, the template, if successful in Alberta, in this window of opportunity. Let's just say it goes through. The catalyst will be able to be matched by every other province, and they will. Now, hear me out. This is for all First Peoples, absolutely Treaty Indians. Alberta has the largest majority of Treaty Indians in all of Canada, per person per capita. Treaty Indians, unceded Indians for British Columbia, Ontario, Quebec, and other parts of Canada, absolutely all the Métis, and absolutely all the Inuit. There's a sad truth codified in the Canadian Constitution that can only be fixed, meaning released, through provincial constitutionalism. It means if you're a separatist or a 51st state or all kinds of other autonomy-seeking parties, you can't separate in this dominion, in this confederation, legal speak is confederation, without the First Peoples. And guess what? The Constitution says there is no federalism for any of those savages. And I'm sorry to say that. This is the legal speak of Canada forever and a day. The federal government says all of the savages, Treaty Indian, unceded Indian, Métis, and Inuit, will never be allowed any form of federalism, even though they invented it, will never be allowed any federalism. They will always be under the harsh iron fist of absolutely the federal government, unless, under division of powers, provincial constitutions address the provincial crown land, and then they can go on and settle with all the First Peoples in each and every region. And that's exactly what we're going to lay out. Now, this isn't everything for the First Peoples, but guess what? 87% of Canada's crown land, a vast majority of that, 58%, is provincial crown land. Now, some provinces it's much more, others not. I don't think people would be surprised if I told you that Quebec, BC, and Ontario absolutely give most of the federal crown land to the federal government. They've made it more federal than anywhere else, BC being the worst. That's a fact. That's a fact. Now, all the other provinces, what we call the western provinces outside of BC, outside of unceded land, are all provincial, mostly provincial. So this template for Alberta can absolutely, for the first time in all of Canada's awful, awful history, can do real truth and reconciliation, settle with all the First Peoples, at least in the template in this province of Alberta, and give them real federalism, real self-government, real self-determination, and allow them to be a nation within a nation, just like the USA. The USA started this. They've laid out the groundwork. These provinces can do it. Specifically, the Alberta Constitution Conventions Act will show you how to legally do that, and for the first time in Canadian history, give real truth and reconciliation to all the First Peoples, and in doing so, allows for settlement to distribute lands, at least in the provincial crown, for all Alberta citizens, Canadians residing in Alberta. It's massive. It's a massive amount of land, and you will codify the rules in doing that. And you will also release the First Peoples, first time in Canadian history, mass amount of land. Not 0.2% of Canada, at least in the province of Alberta. It will be tremendous. Tremendous. Just in the provincial, you're looking at 30% of the province being turned over to all the First Peoples in Alberta. Think about that. Think about that. Huge, huge. Being poor is no longer going to be an issue. This also for every man, woman, child in Alberta. Now, people say, well, how is that going to deal with the federal government? How are you going to address Justin Trudeau and the rest going forward? Folks, once all the other provinces see this tremendous wealth and power bestowed upon all Alberta peoples, all the First Peoples, they see a settlement and they see the investment pouring in, and Albertans go on beyond this and cement a constitution, and they do it just like that. Every province is going to say, we don't want our unaffordable housing, we don't want a tremendous cost of living, we want what Albertans have. Look at what every single man, woman, child in Alberta has. Look at the investment pouring in. They're not poor. They're not subject to the government. Me too. It will spread like wildfire. Boom. Every other province does the template. What do you suppose that does for the remaining federal government and the remaining federal lands and all the First Peoples under the iron fist on reserves with the federal government? Well, it's going to end all that. It's going to end all that. Everyone's going to get on board. And literally, again, the beautiful part about all this is, everybody, it is powered by the Crown. It is in the highest laws of Canada. If you haven't read it, Part 5, Section 58. You can go to the Supreme Court of Canada. You can read Chief Justice Wagner's inputs, even on Wikipedia, and you will find absolutely it is called for, and it's been there all along, but not one crummy, corrupt, filthy premier has ever wanted to do it. More than this, folks, what's important here is the idea of having a higher set of laws that give rules of governance, how to govern, and absolute accountability for all of those you elect. Whatever party you elect, there will be a template of checks and balances you create that they're held to. You'll even have punishments for said politicians who would try to betray you, betray your trust. That would be a first in Canada. That is something you all need. You know it's true. Just in the history of Alberta and UCP, recent history, make a bill, scrap a bill, make a new bill, scrap a bill, make a new bill. Always your losers. And I want to start with the Alberta Advantage. Does everybody at least have a concept of the Alberta Advantage? Lowest personal taxes provincially in all of Canada. Do you know where we sit now with UCP and NDP? In all of these years under Jason Kenney, did you know I'm still paying 5% more of my gross to the province? Since NDP, nothing's been rescinded. Now, business taxes went down. Didn't draw any more business because businesses still have to tax their employees at astronomical rates. In the province of Alberta, used to have the cheapest personal tax rates. Now we have 10% for low income, which used to be the almighty highest for all Albertans. Now we have a 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and finally 15%. Where I sit, that's where I sit, whether I like it or not, in the province of Alberta. 5% more than I paid during Ralph Klein's era. 5% more during Rachel Notley's era. 5% more during all of Jason Kenney's 4 years. He did not rescind any of it. He decided we'll lower business taxes, but actually add more fees and more taxes to the average everyday working Albertan. Like somehow that's gonna be a good thing. Zero Alberta Advantage. The tax advantages now clearly belong to the province of Ontario, at least if you're a working class person, not Alberta. We haven't had the Alberta Advantage for a very, very long time. Rob Peter to pay Paul. NDP, UCP, no difference. I don't see any massive amount of businesses flooding into Alberta or any investment during the entirety of UCP. Absolutely crushing during NDP, but it didn't get better. In fact, it got worse with UCP. Every single investment that was made was backed up by government subsidy, whether federal or absolutely provincial. Nothing that drew people in. You can constitute constitutions that can change all that, with the greatest experts in the world going through all aspects of constitutionalism, every single heading that will be outlined in the Constitutional Conventions Act. All of this will be written down and shown as a template for any premier or any politician running for premier in the next election can utilize. Real power for real people, you the people, and all the first people, at least in the province of Alberta. It will spread like wildfires. At the end all and be all, no. But it is a tremendous step forward, and it's a tremendous kick to the federal government, regardless, for all provinces. And it should unite all provinces and transform the federal government. It's phase one, and a most important step. You can't get independence without addressing these core issues. And if you don't do constitutionalism first, you're never going to get there. It's always going to be fluff, fake, and unconstitutional propaganda, leading you right back to the iron hand of the politicians. We are an autocracy. We are a crown-powered autocracy, a very limited federalism. very autocratic. No rules of governance, no rules on how to govern, and zero accountability in all provinces and territories. Never has been, never will be, as long as we remain like this. There are very few countries that operate like this today. I mean, there's communisms, there's complete dictatorships, but then there's constitutional monarchies, and they are the illusion of democracy, the illusion of freedom. Do you know who has per person per capita the highest cost of living, with the highest home values and the most substantial housing crisis, energy crisis in the world today? That's the United Kingdom. Did you know Charles and his family, and Boris Johnson, who just resigned, and now Truss in there, and she's running the show. Did you know that the government there right now is borrowing against the future generation to pay for the power needs of the citizens today? Did you know that? Unsustainable development. UN Sustainable Development. Serious UK unsustainable development. People live inflated, stacked up on each other in close quarter combat, paying astronomical amounts of money for a handful of dirt, literally. That has always been and always will be the design of the United Kingdom as they remain a constitutional monarchy. It will always be the same for this vast country, Canada, where only a very small portion of it is even allowed to be held by you. That's the sickness of the crown. All of the European ancestors ran from that to come to the New World, to get land, to start fresh, and to never be ruled by a divine human being. Because they're not divine, they're just corrupt, filthy, and narcissistic. It's human nature. You can't give human beings power over other human beings, or you end up in genocide, you end up in racism extreme, class structure, and horrific human rights atrocities. This is the staple, the reality, and you always have the few absolutely crushing the many. In a lot of ways, shapes, and forms, some religious folks say it's satanic. Of course it is. Bibles of old and old established religions warn of this, because that was the system they lived through in that time, and they tried to tell you about it. All religious texts try to tell you about this. But here we are today in 2022, allowing it to go forward. Socialists love it. Supposed conservatives and libertarians love it. But they're not really any of those things. They're just crown-powered dictators. The few over the many. You promise people everything and give them nothing. And as years go by, little by little, by little, by little, you crush them into a tiny, tiny speck. And you've leached out all of everything they're ever going to be. That's not the way the world is supposed to be. It's definitely not the way the world should function post-1945. And it's probably the biggest corruption of the UN today, this whole Commonwealth. It's one of the biggest. Are some of the dictators, communisms, and unitaries problematic too? Sure. But we are a constitutional monarchy, and we owe it to our children to change that. We owe it to our ancestors to live up to what they did coming over here in immigration, to get away from that and make a new start. We can't change the sins of the past, but we can truth and reconcile all of that with all the people in Canada and get it right the first time. We can do that today. And that's what this act promises. And if people still aren't happy, independence can go from there. If people don't want to do that and they look at other templates, a 51st state, you could do that. The idea of having more options and not limiting yourself is what I'm trying to do here, to give the people as much power, as much options as they want going forward. And you can absolutely bet with this legislation, if a premier enacts it, It won't be shot down, and you, the people, will get your say in writing absolutely your rules of governance, how you're going to be governed, and put in absolute accountability, limiting whatever party comes forward. That's how real countries operate. That's real democracy, and that's real we the people. Thanks, that's my video. Share, share, share. I hit a lot of topics. I answered many questions here. Get it out there, get it shared. And if you see people commenting, link this video, pop it in the comments, say, hey, maybe you should take the time and listen to this, because I promise you it will be published November 11th, 2022, and you'll see me live at the legislature Remembrance Day handing off copies to all the leaders of the political parties. Their choice to throw it away, but you're all going to see it, and you're going to know who's for you and who's absolutely for themselves. And sadly, I can guarantee you 80%, or at least for themselves, 80% of all of them. Scary stuff. Take care, everybody. Bye now. That's my video.